And we started that work by meeting communities where they are with a listening tour, going to every corner of Connecticut and hearing from parents, superintendents, members of boards of education, teachers, in some cases students themselves, to try to find out what we can do to support special education going forward. And one thing we heard consistently across the board was a need for funding, not only going forward, but an immediate need, a critical need for emergency funding now. Under our current excess cost reimbursement grants, schools have been getting a reimbursement. In some cases, they were expecting 70% based on the allocation that was available. It has fallen down to 60%. They already had anticipated and allocated, more than that in their current budgets, and so they're really facing a critical shortfall. They were able to breathe a sigh of relief when they heard, every single district, when they heard that this funding was passed unanimously by the Senate and passed by the House. And then there was a lot of concern, as many of us have been hearing, when they thought, when the uncertainty arose of whether this funding was actually going to be granted. One thing we said, and we heard over and over during these listening tours, is that people said they felt they were heard, sometimes for the very first time. This was the first time they felt that the Senate was really, and the House was really listening to the needs around special education, to the needs of teachers, to the needs of districts, that this is really impacting budgets. We made a promise to them then that we're listening to what they said. They came to us with desperate pleas that what they need right now is immediate funding, and this is delivering on that promise. We promised that we were going to be there, we're going to listen to what they said. We listened, we had these tours, we listened, we're incorporating that feedback as we go forward, but this is something that they absolutely need now. It's in fact so critical that I can tell you, many of us have probably heard from members of our constituents, members in our district who were worried about the resolution of this funding. My mother is a paraprofessional in Trumbull, and the teachers have already been, once they heard about a potential veto, a potential, restriction of this funding, immediately there was a concern that this is not something people are generally talking about in communities. They're not talking about what happens up here in Hartford, in the Capitol. This, however, is something everybody's talking about. It's that critical. Teachers wanted to know whether the money was coming. Superintendents wanted to know whether or not they can account for that in their budgets as they're having budget negotiations. So we need to deliver on that promise and provide that funding now, which will get them at least sufficiently to get them to a point where they can at least account for the budget shortfalls that they had not anticipated in the current year. Thank you, Madam President.